I notice that we only have one novel. The rest are short stories, maybe a play, some poetry. Why did you decide to go with just one novel?
Just makes it more doable, and so that fits much more in line with our approach to writing, which is let's break it down, let's make it doable. We're not trying to make this like so challenging that kids can't do it. We want them to be able to do it.
And I do remember a lot of students, especially those that might struggle, can identify, like you said, the rising action or the climax much easier when it's within just 3 or 4 pages. Matt, today I wanted to ask you a few questions. These especially come up on Facebook as questions that are often asked, but why are the stories not included with the Essentials in Literature curriculum?
Now, that's a good question. Whenever I started creating this literature curriculum, I had in the beginning, I had only intended to do essentials in writing. And then as we kept moving up the grade levels, I realized, no, I want to do literature too, so we can do the full English credit, right? For parents to be able to have both literary analysis and writing. And I had so many literary works that I wanted to do, especially some by authors who are still living. Well, the first thing I did was reach out to a copyright specialist to say, what can I do? What is legal? What is not legal? And in order for me to be able to put every single short story in the textbook that I wanted to use, which, as you know, Essentials in Writing focuses a lot on short works rather than a lot of long works, then that was about 25 different copyright requests that we would have to do, which she informed me that sometimes they can take up to 5 years to get approval for it, just because the publishers don't always respond and that kind of thing. And then some of the stories themselves would cost around $15,000 each in order to just publish, to have that copyright release to publish it in our textbook that we then sell. So one of the workarounds is just to provide the parents with the list of stories that we use. And then oftentimes authors have those on the internet anyway. And so we did it to save the cost, because right now our literature levels, I think, are around 120 or something like that. I can't remember, but they would be around 500 a piece. And it's just not feasible for a homeschool family to pay that much for a literature curriculum, no matter how good it is. And
Right.
yeah, so
Well, why can't we just send them a list or send them a file that contains, all the stories in it?
Yeah, the copyright specialist just says you have to be really careful, because what you don't want to do is to sell a product that uses someone else's works. And you can get into some really sticky situations. So I think that's why a lot of our parents have been working together and creating those documents that have the links for those stories to make it easily accessible. And that's perfectly fine. We just have to tread lightly on that, because of course we want to be following the rules and conducting a company that is legal and all that good stuff. So, but we always check to be sure they're easily found just by doing a Google search with the title of the name of the story and then the author's name.
And how to do that is also in the teacher handbook. Isn't that correct?
It is. And it's as simple as using Google. That's the best way to go about, is just to open Google on any browser, type the exact title of the story and the author's name following it. And I mean, every time there's going to be a hit that's going to show up on the first page where you can find the story or a PDF of the story to be able to read it right online.
Good. Okay. So I notice that we only have one novel. The rest are short stories, maybe a play, some poetry. Why did you decide to go with just one novel?
Well, we taught together in public education, and one thing that I found was that I could teach more literary analysis using the stories in the literature textbooks, which gave the students more practice. And I really liked that, because with a novel, you're still analyzing literature, but it's over a longer period of time centered around one story or one, storyline. And so it's a different approach. And with a short story, you can focus on one literary element, almost always one, with then maybe one secondary. You have a main one and a secondary one. And also the students, not as much as we love literature, not every student loves to read, and especially the stories that we may choose or pick. And so one thing that I found was that by doing short stories, when I taught, that students could handle that, right? Because you can read it in one sitting and you still get the full effect of the plot, which is the beginning all the way up through the rising action and then the exciting part, the climax. And there's still conflict. There's still so many good things that you can work with. And it just makes it more doable. And so that fits much more in line with our approach to writing, which is, let's break it down. Let's make it doable. We're not trying to make this like so challenging that kids can't do it. We want them to be able to do it. We want them to be successful. So shorter works are much easier than that. Also, I wanted to set myself apart in curriculum in that subject area, because most of what I found online was mostly novels or classic novels. Mm-hmm. And so I want to be different, obviously, but I would still say most of it just is around the fact that I really focus on trying to make it easy for students to be able to succeed. I mean, if you do 6 novels a year, for some students, that's great. They love it. I mean, they can do, multiple novels a year, but actually analyzing 4 novels a year to 6 novels a year is a lot of work. And so I did include one novel because I do want students to have the opportunity to do that, where you work with a longer work and you sit with it for more time. But ultimately, I feel like that it's a little overload when students who don't like to read, who English language arts is not their favorite subject. It's too hard in a sense. So,
and we do provide a copy of the novel. Isn't that right?
That's right. The novel comes with the literature, but the stories, you do have to look them up, or the poems or articles or whatever.
Right. And I do remember a lot of students, especially those that might struggle, can identify, like you said, the rising action or the climax much easier when it's within just 3 or 4 pages of text, mm-hmm. and not, the rising action can last for several chapters in a novel. So mm-hmm. that when you're first teaching, especially those elements of fiction, I think that's a great way to utilize short stories.
Yes, yes. Absolutely.
What if there's a story in the curriculum that I just don't want my child to read, or we've read it before, I want to do something different? Is that okay?
Mm-hmm. I get this question a lot with the novel. They say, well, we've already read To Kill a Mockingbird, and that's fine. But have you studied it from a literary analysis perspective? It's different. I prefer that students have read a novel or a story before we actually study it, because it's not for entertainment, although it is entertaining. We enjoy it while we study it, but the real goal is to do the work around that particular piece of literature. So it doesn't matter if you've read it before. It's actually better if you have. You can still study it for its literary value and focus on the conflict, the plot. Man, there's theme, symbolism. There's just so much to really dive into, because it's, when we read it for entertainment, we're basically just reading it for its emotional value. When we study it, we really look deep into, like, what did this author do to create all of this? And so it's perfectly fine. But there are times that parents may say that, well, we find that story objectionable, or we don't really want to read that one again or something. So one thing that parents can do is they can use the process that we follow with our essentials in literature for each individual story or for the novel. And they can, it's kind of like a scavenger hunt, right? So let's say we're doing the novel and they want to do a different novel. Well, as they're reading what I'm doing with students in the textbook, like we stop at chapter 3 and let's see, do we have any conflict that's person versus person? Well, we're doing it because in that story there is,
Right.
and we're wanting to focus on it. But the parent can say, okay, well, we're reading a different novel. Is there any person versus person conflict in these first 3 chapters? The conversations can still be had, and it still can be an effective way. It's just following the pattern that we're following. And then when we get 3 more chapters later, we may focus on the rising action and which events that were conflict actually propelled the story forward towards the climax. What are those events that are conflict? And then labeling them. Are they internal? Are they external? And if they're external, what type of conflict is it? And even though it's mostly applicable to the story we're reading or the novel that we're reading, it's still an activity that you can do while you're reading any other novel. So I've had some parents say, well, my kids love to read novels. And so they'll read 6 or 7 per school year, in addition to the one they do with the Essentials in Literature. And they just look at all the questions in the fiction section with the short stories. And then they go to the novel section, look at all those questions, and they're just constantly asking themselves those questions as they read, and they're analyzing literature. So that's a good way to do it.
That is a good way to do it. I like that.
Awesome. Yes. Well, we're very much about making sure that our parents succeed and that their kids could succeed. And that's why we're doing these teacher talk episodes, is to hopefully bring to light some answers, bring answers to some questions that parents have had, as they use Essentials in Literature and Essentials in Writing. And I just want to reiterate to parents, if you have questions, we have a full staffed education team now that are always more than happy to help you, to walk through the curriculum with you, or to help you with an activity, or even to just say, here's some things you could do for a different story if you chose a different story. And we're here to support you. And obviously, if you have questions about the curriculum itself, you can reach out to us anytime. That's what we're here for.